When you're young, dumb, and awkward, truth is you might need a few pushes. That's what the whole being a kid thing is all about. And each of these shows gives its ensemble cast of high school archetypes a big push. The characters, most of them socially awkward or inept in some way, are pushed together by luck and circumstance before being forced into an experiment. Said experiment has them suffering unnatural phenomena, forcing them into various funny, tragic, or dramatic happenings. And love triangles. The first of these shows is Kokoro Connect. It aired in 2012, adapting 4 light novels from an 11-volume series. It follows a cultural research club made up of kids lumped together due to not finding a club in their interest. Taichi is the selfishly selfless main protagonist and closet pervert. Aoki is a chill guy who's madly in love with Yui, but Yui is afraid of men. Inaba is the bossy, jaded cynic, and Iori is bright and cheerful whenever she feels like it. Their club work on the school paper is interrupted by Heartseed, a non-human, incredibly powerful entity who possesses bodies at a whim to explain the various phenomena affecting the cast. He puts them through body swapping, outbursts of strong desire, age regression, and thought transference, one phenomena per volume adapted. Kiznaiver, however, is an original production that aired this year. In an effort to promote world peace, the Kizna Association selected 7 students of awkward social statuses and forced them to feel each other's physical and emotional pain in order to get them to connect with each other. Katsura doesn't actually feel pain, however, and is emotionally stunted for it. This leaves his thoughtful childhood friend Chidori's feelings unrequited. There's also the hot-blooded and reckless Tenga, the bundle of derpy joy that is Nico, the cold and guarded Maki, the two-faced Yuta, and the Isomu, and Noriko, the passionate yet detached overseer of the whole project. Right from the first glance, there's a clear separation between the two in aesthetic alone. For starters, Studio Trigger brings a distinct visual style to Kiznaiver. The character designs have clear shapes and colors, and the quick look makes it easy to guess what archetype each of them might fall into at a glance. Beyond that, the clean, crisp, slightly futuristic Sugimori has a very modern feel. In particular, there is the striking image of the raised bridge, a natural symbol for making connections. As it's inspired from a very modern bridge design, it keeps in line with a sense of advancement and progress that led to the super science responsible for the Kizna system. Studio Silverlink, however, gives Kokoro Connect a more natural feeling, setting it in a less different version of our world. The character designs for the anime and the art for the light novels are done by Yukiko Horiguchi, who notably did the character designs of K-On! This deliberate choice purposely evokes a popular series that takes place in a realistic setting, furthering the groundedness of Kokoro Connect through the intertextuality. This matches the backgrounds and overall scenery, which is pretty normal. I wouldn't call it bland, the direction is just enough so that's not boring at least, but it's not a big point of interest. Despite that though, the contrast does highlight a big difference between the two shows, which matches the subtlety of the phenomena and the forces enacting them. While in Kiznaiver, the scars on the wrists of those afflicted have the tendency to glow or sound off, in Kokoro Connect the phenomena are more subtle. With the exception of age regression, they are all in the mind. Minds swapping into different bodies, personal desires exploding outward, or thoughts being passed along without control. Even age regression only lasts a limited amount of time, and when it's over the victim is flooded with fresh memories from the period their body shifted back to, keeping the focus on the mental. Heartseed operates in secret, advising the cast not to let word of what's going on in the club get out, and considering how all-powerful Heartseed seems to be, I wouldn't challenge that. However, as far as settings go, I think the biggest problem with Kiznaiver for me is that its world was not delved into enough, or alternatively, it's that it was developed too much. For starters, I think the scale is just too big. The Kizna group was funded by organizations and governments all over the world for purposes of world peace. I mean, I guess I should just assume that war is still an issue. The world seems slightly more futuristic, but is it more or less peaceful than what we have today? A more dangerous world would be one more likely to develop the Kizna system. And also, are people less able to empathize in general, or is it just these guys? Because I couldn't tell you. The average person is liable to just gawk at whatever's happening, but that's all too common in real life as well. Yet the main characters are clearly inept when it comes to being social. So, when Nori talks about how the Kizna system is needed to make bonds, either 1. She's completely unaware that people can make friends normally, 2. Actively unwilling to believe that that's the optimal choice, or 3. People becoming friends normally is not actually common in the setting. The last one I'm a bit iffy on since Maki did indeed make a friend before, and there are a couple other pairs at school, so it's not super unusual. In that case, if she is aware people can make friends normally, that means her desires are purely for selfish reasons as she's the only one unable to make bonds, yet she seems convinced she's doing it for the sake of everyone in Sugimori and world peace. I think this disconnect makes Nori's actions during the final episode a bit harder to get behind, which makes the ending fall a bit flatter than it should. If the setting were fleshed out more, such as showing that it isn't just a problem with her and the other characters, it might have given more weight to her actions. Alternatively, if the scale of her motives were dialed back to something more personal, the climax would have been less bombastic, likely focusing more strongly on Urushibara and Yamada, or the 5 vegetables. Hey, doesn't she... Oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. Oh... Well, that would have been a cool reference. Kokoro Connect, though, doesn't go too big with its 4 climaxes, at least not in scale. Emotionally, they're all pretty big, especially the first and the last one. However, not only does Kokoro Connect keeping the scale down make it easier to focus on what's important, I have to say I enjoy Heartseed conceptually. His motivation as an author surrogate is so clear I can't help but to relate. He only claims that these things are happening to the main characters because it's interesting. In fact, in episode 4, after Taichi talks Iori down from some drama, Heartseed takes control of her and has her jump off a bridge. She's placed in a life-threatening situation purely so that he might see what happens in the drama that unfolds. It's pretty contrived, but I think it's okay since it's about how the characters are reacting, not Heartseed himself. The plot is only happening in the first place due to the same contrivance, and I don't think that there being some big grand purpose to it all would somehow make the series better. The author letting their clear intent of creating interesting situations shine through helps avoid distracting questions like, is lack of empathy an issue for the characters or the whole city? Sure, there's some mystery to him, but it's never the focus. I think the part that sells the author surrogate idea to me is in the last arc. He approaches Aoki and Yui in 2 separate instances to declare that they are uninteresting people. Throughout the show, the two just aren't given as much focus as Iori and Inaba. Even in the second arc when Yui's worried that her impulses might hurt someone, or in the third one where Aoki's resurfaced memories of an old middle school crush muddle with his feelings toward Yui, both of these are wrapped up before the climax of the arc, which goes back to the love triangle trio. Since Yui and Aoki aren't given much to do in the 4th arc either, I figured Heartseed's comments are the frustrations of the author turned into dialogues. But as an actual character, it's good that Heartseed doesn't get a lot of focus because he just doesn't have much character. When he does show up, it's usually to drag things down with exposition as he explains a new phenomenon. Plus there's this really unnecessary and obnoxious sound effect whenever he comes in to control a body. For that matter, in general, the presentation of Kiznaiver usually just blows Kokoro Connect out of the water. To keep talking about the note of sound direction, Kiznaiver's use of sound effects can be just goofy in a fun way. Kiznaiver also has a lot of character put into little things as well, like when the building is being demolished. The characters each cover their mouths, but in slightly different ways. Niko's using her hair because she's weird. Yuta's too cool to use both hands. Chidori's using both because she's a naggy worrywart and using 2 hands is safer. Maki has one arm kinda hanging there because she's a bitch, while Tanga doesn't seem too concerned. The soundtrack is also strong in many scenes, while Kokoro Connect's soundtrack is something I barely noticed. That's not to say Kokoro Connect is poorly directed, I just didn't find it memorable overall, except in some cool instances. I like how when each episode ends, we get a preview for the next episode set to the ending theme, starting early before the ending starts for real. And the result is pretty hype, although I do have a weakness for this kind of stuff. But the 2 neatest things I found in the direction were in the first 5 episodes during the body swapping arc. The editing made the body swapping take you out of one scene and drop you into another just right, making things sink in for the audience just like it does for the characters without being quite enough to take you out of the show. But if there's one thing Kokoro Connect does really well, it has to be the voice performances. Overall, both shows have strong casts. In Kiznaiver, I enjoyed Tomoaki Mayano's performance as Tenka and Misaki Kuno as Nico. Some people found her pretty annoying, but I thought she was okay. Although I didn't really like Yuki Kaji as Katsuhira. Admittedly, he didn't have the easiest role. It's gotta be tough to sound monotone without also sounding tired or bored. But overall, he didn't do a lot for me, and when he did the forced crying in episode 10, I laughed both times while watching it, but not during any of the other super dramatic moments, so But the cast of Kokoro Connect had to go above and beyond and they nailed it. There's a tendency for shows that use body swapping to swap voices as well, but Kokoro Connect is one of the ones that inverts that. Aki Toyosaki's performance as Iori is probably my favorite in either of the shows, and since I love Miyuki Sawashiro so much, that's saying something. Even when Toyosaki was voicing Iori pretending to be Inaba swapped into herself, she just nails it. In general, they were good enough that I didn't even feel like it was necessary to say who was inside who half the time. They're great throughout the show, of course, but those moments in the first arc really had them showing their stuff. And since we're on the characters, both of those shows are pretty contentious on that note, so I need to talk about what I think makes a good character. A good character has to be either funny, interesting, or likable. And I don't mean likable as in, I like this character, since you can enjoy characters who are downright awful people if they're interesting characters or they still make you laugh. In this context, I mean that the character is likable as a person. You might want to root for them or see them succeed, but a good character doesn't have to be likable. So back to Kiznaiver. Most of the characters aren't actually too interesting, so they have to fall back on being funny or likable, and those are harder to sell, especially being funny. If you don't find Hisoma funny, then he's just going to wear on you. He's not completely irrelevant since his existence highlights flaws of the Kizna system, as described by the Pedantic Romantic in his video on the system's faults. The Kizna system can only work if those affected avoid pain, but Hisomu doesn't, which causes it to break down. At its worst, those connected to him would come to resent him for causing them pain, or come to like it themselves, fucking up the whole experiment. And since he's not particularly likable, only funny at times, and not too interesting beyond that, I'd say he's the least good character in the show except for maybe Nori. To compare him to Tenga, who is more widely enjoyed, him wearing his emotions on his sleeve led to some funny moments even though I still wouldn't call him super likable. He does try to help Katsuhiro with his bully problem and Chidori with her romantic problems, but it's largely out of his own self-interest. With the former, he wants Katsuhira's money, and in the case of Chidori, her affections, even if he doesn't realize this until later. I could argue that said affections basically came from nowhere since there isn't much hinting he likes her before this. Likewise with Nico liking him, but it's actually not too unrealistic. It's been noted in those who are less socially capable that they tend to take platonic comments and interpret them as romantic due to not having the experience otherwise. Nico falling in love with Tenga after some headpats is actually within my realm of believability, just as Tenga liking Chidori after getting a meal is. On the subject of Nico, her adorable antics were amusing, but I found her eager, earnest desire to make friends to be likable as well. Yuta and Chidori weren't quite as likable or funny, but when playing off the other characters, whether it was Yuta's awkward interest in Maki or Chidori being poked at, I was more than able to tolerate and enjoy them. That, and Yuta's goofy running animation and Chidori's blushes got me every fucking time. Then, past the funnier characters is where things get a little rougher. Nuria is the closest thing the show has to an antagonist, thus she's no one to root for. She did have an occasional deadpan humor, but she wasn't quite interesting enough to carry any of her motivations through the climax, leaving her as my least favorite of the cast. Katsuhiro is a little more likable, but I've never been a fan of passive emotionless protagonists, so he didn't do much for me. Maki, however, had to be my favorite character from Kiznaiver. The climax of her arc was one of the highlights of the show, and even though there's nothing particularly groundbreaking conceptually about her arc, the execution of her character was strong enough that I enjoyed her. Moving on to the smaller cast of Kokoro Connect, Taichi is okay. He's got more than a few shades of your standard anime protagonist. He's generally the straight man to the other's antics, and his desires to help people are criticized for being selfish. Oh no, how dare he help people because seeing others being sad makes him sad. What keeps him from being boring to me though is how often his admittedly normal perversions were touched upon. Having a perverted protagonist isn't unusual, but it isn't as common in a nice guy protagonist like Taichi. In general, I actually appreciated how casually Kokoro Connect touched on sexuality while never feeling trashy or pandering. Sometimes it was funny. Other times it was brought up in reference to the phenomena, or even as part of certain other character moments. Aoki unfortunately isn't too interesting. He's a tolerable bro character and he does get some good moments, but overall there's not a lot to him. Yui isn't too far ahead, but at least she's a bit more interesting due to being forced to interact with guys in the club despite past trauma making her afraid of them. Again, considering Heartseed's feelings, the author is well aware of the fact that they're relatively uninteresting. However, Inaba was one of my favorite characters with her harsh, cynical attitude guarding her shyer, more awkward aspects. Miyuki-sawa Shiro, I love you! My favorite character from either show though is definitely Iori. Due to a desire to please everyone, she puts on the face of a cute, fun-loving girl, swapping masks based on who she's interacting with to the point of falling in love with Taichi because everyone thinks they'd look good together even though she comes to find out she doesn't really like him. After an indirect body swap kiss, she puts off any commitment to him in the beginning of the second arc due to Heartseed shenanigans before turning him down outright at the start of the fourth arc. Following that, when thought transference has her finding out what the others think of her and has them finding out how fake she can be, she shatters her masks and becomes an outright bitch. I will add that the switching of personalities can be cheap from a writing perspective. When a character can do anything a writer needs them to be, it can risk getting out of hand. We all act a bit differently towards those we interact with, yet despite the other characters being fairly grounded, Iori showcases a more extreme idea. However, I'm ultimately fine with it because Iori struggling with her identity is a perfect fit for the show. Since the phenomena send her into some existential territory, although it leads to them bringing up some fairly basic psychology and philosophy, I still enjoyed following her character. Collectively, however, I did notice that while both shows are about these guys getting together and forming friendships, they still handle that differently. I mean, they're all friends, I don't question that, but in Kiznaiver you've got things like Nico approaching Katsuhiro and Hisomu, or people just hanging out at Katsuhiro's place for no reason. I mean, it's smarter to stay together because of the Kizna system, but still. In Kokoro Connect they're together at school, sometimes into the evening working on club stuff, but we never see them outside of school except for Heartseed related stuff. They're never just hanging out together for the sake of it. Furthermore, while I'd argue that the cast of Kokoro Connect is more interesting overall and had some good chemistry, the more ridiculous cast of Kiznaiver was a bit more fun to watch in general as they played off each other, and the situations they found themselves in were often great. The shared pain itself doesn't lead to a lot of events, but they have the tasks given to them by the Kizna Association to force drama out of them, so to speak. However, since it only has one aspect to its system, I feel as though the creators bounced off as many ideas as they could with the concept, resulting in a few things that could have been tweaked or outright removed. But Kokoro Connect has a different, more eclectic approach with Heartseed's machinations. After all, it adapts 4 separate volumes, each with its own idea. Which begs the question, would Kokoro Connect have been better if it focused on and expanded on only one of its ideas? Most of them were fine as they were, but the age regression arc was probably the worst of the show. At only 3 episodes, it was the shortest, thankfully, but even then there really wasn't enough going for it. It was treated as a big deal when Taichi broke one of the phenomenon's rules, and the age regression that was previously limited to a certain time frame became unlimited, but literally nothing meaningful came out of it. The fact that it's physical meant that it couldn't just happen randomly without risking everything being discovered, and the increased access to past memories is only meaningful for a few characters. It still wasn't quite bad, but it just doesn't work as well as the rest of the show. Conversely, there could have been way more done with the body swapping in the first arc. When bodies do swap, the characters notify each other as soon as possible. But if, say, one of them were trapped and forced to pretend to be someone else for extended lengths of time, then they could have been used for either hilarious or dramatic results. But at the same time, if body swapping were expanded into the whole show, the characterization that came from the other phenomena wouldn't work quite as well. The second and fourth arcs are better examples of going exactly as far with an idea as it needed to go. Doing more with those ideas might have risked them overstaying their welcome. The fourth arc in general was a nice finish with a healthy dose of self-awareness and a good climax to cap the adaption off, but at the same time it was definitely an ending urging the audience to read the novels. While I would have liked to see more body swapping, the end result is fine. And while Kiznaiver might have been helped by trimming a few ideas here or there, I doubt it would benefit from going the Kokoro Connect route and trying more things. From what we do have of each show, however, there is a matter of themes. Both shows largely focus on connecting to others. In Kiznaiver, this is the whole point. While the Kizna system helped them to form their bonds, it's not a solution in and of itself. Those two bullies became connected through the Kizna system, and Bucktooth came to realize how shitty Tall Guy was because of it. Do they even have names? Well, they still hang out afterwards anyway, but still. However, while Connect is right there in the title, the themes of Kokoro Connect are more about accepting your own true character and making strong bonds with others while still being honest about yourself. The secrets the characters keep torment them, and when they can't find the answers, they're likely to shut themselves off, physically or emotionally, until their friends can drag them out of it. But the casts of both shows make that effort, which is why they're friends regardless of any weird phenomena, even if they might not have been friends without being pushed together. Considering that the shows were both two different takes on what was roughly the same concept, I'm glad I found both of them to be distinct and enjoyable. Neither is flawless, and they each had their own spikes or valleys in quality. Yet each one made me laugh or hit me in the right emotions every so often, that I found them well worth the rewatch. I think if you had enjoyed one of them, it might be worthwhile to check out the other. That is, if you're into high school series with a healthy dose of drama in the first place. Because remember, high school sucks. You have to take classes and learn shit you'll never use again. You'll probably make friends with guys you were stuck with, graduate, and then after a few years you'll drift away, possibly never seeing many of them again. But even if you don't, the experiences you had with them could stick with you long beyond high school. Thanks for watching.